Gideon the Ninth is a necromancy-based galactic sci-fi story that grabbed my attention as soon as I started really hearing about it. I recently tweeted out on Twitter, hey, what are some amazing fantasy books that have fantastic LGBTQ plus representation? And this was the one that was the most recommended by far. And I'm very happy it was, because I really enjoyed this story. Though I'm going to add on to this, as I occasionally do with my positive reviews. I don't think this is going to be one everybody loves because of a few more chaotic elements at play. I can understand why, looking online, Gideon the Ninth has quite the polarizing response. I see a lot of 2-star reviews and a lot of 5-star reviews. So let's go ahead and talk about what I thought of this necromantic galactic sci-fi. I've been on this unorthodox fantasy kick because I've just kind of made it very well known that I'm just not vibing with stories that are so traditional fantasy. And this one for me, man oh man, it helps scratch the itch of going in a different direction. What we have here is this, as I said, galactic empire with a magic system of necromancy, and we follow the character Gideon, who works in the 9th necromantic house, one that focuses on resurrecting of skeletons. So each house has a different specialization, and her house is one that just brings them bony boys up. But Gideon is not a necromancer. She's actually just an elite soldier who's brought along as a guard for the actual necromancer who's going off for a trial to become the next elite within the Empire necromancers, reaching this almost borderline immortal status. Very interesting. And what ensues is a story filled with mystery, magic, thrills, and of course, necromancy. And I just want to say, I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. Necromancy's cool. Like, it's just really awesome. You can't read a book with necromancy in it and not go, okay, that was awesome. Like, it's just badass. As a magic system, it's going to lend an element of cool to your story that's essentially free. But I don't mean to take away from the author's accomplishments and utilization of necromancy here, because not only does it have a lot of the tried and true harder concepts of necromancy acting as a great foundation, but there's a lot of new and very interesting quirks to the necromancy within this story that I really enjoyed. The magic system here is something you can discuss and talk about really quite a bit, and I very much so enjoyed it. That's a strong element to this book for sure. I can't talk much more about the plot without getting into spoilers, so let's go ahead and just discuss character here. Gideon herself, brilliant. So filled with personality, it just bleeds off the page. Just constant quips and smart mouthing here. If you really like Sal from Seven Blades in Black, or I'd even say like elements of Glocta in a way from Joe Abercrombie's work, I think you'll really enjoy Gideon's kind of just witticism and existence in the pages. Someone who feels like they are just an element of chaos in the story and is always just kind of breaking what's to be expected. Though I will say, and this kind of falls into that warning I put at the beginning, I could see her being so over the top that some people are turned off from her. And again, I just think it's gonna be a character that some people say, nah, not my favorite, to favorite of the year status. The development around character is quite nice here as well. In fact, there's one specific thing earlier on in the story that I just as a reader appreciated from the author, because it's so easy to show a character is getting better at something, and earlier on Gideon is getting better at a certain kind of sword play, and it just showed like, yeah, all you have to do is show that. All these other authors who just don't bother putting anything in there and just suddenly they're better at stuff, you just need like these couple paragraphs. So thank you for that. And as we get to know Gideon, most other characters don't develop a whole lot. We more just kind of better understand and discover who they are, but this being a first book, that's understandable, and I actually want to hit on that point. This is the first in a series. Some of the really negative reviews online didn't seem to entirely understand that, which as a reviewer you need to check, because some people seem to be complaining about like, oh, certain plot things aren't wrapped up, and the specific plot things they talked about are clearly where like book 2 is going. Though I will admit, and this is going to be one of the things that some people will be bothered by, you can nitpick this plot, and there are holes that exist within this first story, I think. And that's actually where I think the real polarization of this story comes from. This plot isn't the strongest. It's a bit messy. I myself am a very character world driven reader, and plot comes second to me. Of course, I still appreciate a good plot, but it's not going to be as important to me. If you are someone who really needs to think through every single plot point and all the implications and how they come together, it's not communicated the clearest, and I find there to be some minor nitpicks you could have in terms of character choices and, oh, that shouldn't exist, this existed only to serve as a thing for that. It can kind of fall apart in that sense. If you're able to ignore that, though, there's a phenomenal underlying mystery for the narrative here that I was very interested in. And I saw some things coming, but I don't want to get with those people who says things about ending like vaguely that end up being spoilers, but I do think the ending will deliver some hella haymaker gut punches to a very high percentage of the people who read this, as well as some very enjoyable surprises. And kind of surprising with that more messy plot is the pacing just burns right along, because I just don't feel like the author was hyper focused on their plot, and instead it's more about enjoying this character and establishing the world, which plays right into my preferences as a reader, and you just need to judge on your own, okay, how does that play into my preferences. Getting into some of the smaller things here, I really just want to reemphasize, if you are interested in necromancy as a magic system, it bangs here. Such a cool necromancy execution. Loved that. And having this more like humorous approach to what is objectively, and I use that word rarely in reviews, a dark and kind of creepy world, really just like could have fallen apart, but it never did for me. I liked it. And there's so much consequences and stakes as characters take damage, are punished for stupid choices. That is actually something that really let me forgive a lot of the other things people could have problems with, because I am constantly complaining that authors are afraid to hurt and have consequences for their characters. Absolutely not the case here. People suffer across the board, and they're just going to make quips about it while they do. I guess one of the reasons that like this over-the-top quippiness didn't bother me as much is I'm someone who compensates when I'm like depressed or in a bad situation with comedy, like, you hide your inner emotions with a layer of humor and you let that horrid depression inside just be buried with it. And so I can just understand and relate to how many of these characters are just willing to, in the face of just death and so much else, just, I'll at least mouth off right now. Getting into a couple of the harder ratings here, I'll give the character a solid 8 out of 10, though I will add the asterisk on there that several people might have a much lower score. This is, of course, all personal preference. And the plot, unfortunately for me, though, has to go as low as a 5. It's average, it's fun, but you can pick it apart. Pacing is a bit higher though, with a solid 6.5, and themes, I don't like putting a hard number on themes, but they certainly exist, and you can dig into them a lot. But moving out of the quality out of 10 rating, let's go ahead and transition into the how prevalent it is in the text rating out of 10. So remember, this isn't about how good it is, just about how much of it there is within the story. Magic, super high. This is rivaling like Dresden levels of nearly every line of dialogue has some kind of connection to the magic, the world around it. So there. So I'm going to go ahead and bump that to an 8.5 out of 10. If you are a fantasy reader who likes reading for the magic systems, pick this one up. Such a heavy magic system that blends into the story and world pretty much flawlessly. The violence is quite prevalent in the text, but it's not hyper violent where it's like gory or extreme focus on like the nastier aspects that'll really turn your stomach. I would say the things that'll bother people the most are related to the necromancy. I think surprising absolutely nobody, but I'm just gonna say 6 out of 10 because yes, there's a lot of violence. It's actually written very beautifully. I think this author did a wonderful job of having like some really interesting portrayals of violence that didn't feel like they were minimizing it, but had a certain almost dance-like quality to them that I enjoyed. And again, they just avoided that going into the over-the-top, brutal for no reason aspect that I personally am not a fan of, though I know many people do like. Though those people could still get some satisfaction here from some of those necromancy moments I mentioned. The world for a first book is really surprisingly well done. It's interesting, different. The atmosphere is so strong. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 for those fantasy nuts who really want a world they can discuss and imagine themselves living in. I don't know why you'd want to live in this world, but there's enough there for you to certainly do so. Again, galactic empire constantly warring with necromancy and all these political houses warring against each other internally. What more could you want? My overall score for Gideon the Ninth is going to be a 7.5 out of 10, which is actually the same score I gave Peace Talks in the Dresden Files. That should let you know how positive I am on this. I really enjoyed Gideon the Ninth, and I'm looking forward to the sequel, Harrow the Ninth, so much now. Yeah, definitely go ahead and check this one out if you are a character world magic-based reader like myself, though if a slightly weaker and messier plot can really ruin a book for you, maybe wait. Actually, I'm just gonna say wait until the sequel's out and see if things are cleaned up a bit there, because a lot of the complaints I'm seeing some people have online could certainly be things that are addressed and clarified in the sequel, and then I'll just come back and add a pinned comment to this review going, ignore that plot stuff, it's not that bad, and just continue on to the second book. Or I guess I could add a pinned comment that's like, we could never get the answer, but I still really liked it. But yeah, my concluding thoughts are this is an unorthodox fantasy story that's going to be divisive. I'm just fortunate enough in this situation to be on the more positive end of that. And after being on the more negative side of things recently, it's really refreshing to read a story like this one that gave me so much to enjoy. Great LGBTQ plus representation, as people said. Really interesting execution of so many ideas. And I would probably not be shocked to see this mentioned in the Fantasy Awards at the end of the year for a couple of reasons. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace. And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high tier Patreons, Ellie and Anselm. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys are having a killer week.